crap, Logan, you got the fan mail?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I was reading that. Yeah, here. This one's for both of us. You want to read it?
Sure.
So, oh, it's upside down. Let's see. Father Martin. For Guggen, dude. You ain't doing nothing for Guggen. Gross. This one's for you.
How did you know that my nickname was that in high school?
I don't know. This one's for me.
Another one for Guggen.
This one is too, dude. I'm tired of that garbage. Dude.
Lunkers?
Lunkers.
No.
What the heck? So we're
Dear Finners, do y'all like Zoom? I think they is very nice. Good baits. From Robert Hart Star.
I like good Zoom.
Yeah, they pretty decent.
Let's see. I think I might have a couple things.
I think we might have a couple things.
I think I like them pretty good. What's up, guys? We got a new video for you here. This is a deep dive into Zoom Bait Company. Now, this is a new series we're starting out. It's basically to give you the history, some backstory, a bait lineup of each company that we do, and we couldn't think of a better one to start off with than Zoom. They're one of the original soft plastic companies. They're still pretty much only a soft plastic company. They have a hollow body frog, but I mean, it's
made of plastic.
Yeah, still soft plastic. But we really wanted to just give you guys the backstory, the bait lineup, some applications you can use for their different baits, and then we'll go into a review segment at the end and give you our honest opinions on it. But sit back, relax, and do some learning.
Because this will be a longer one.
It will be. Zoom Bait Company was started in 1977 in Watkinsville, Georgia.
Specifically by a gaming machine salesman by the name of Ed Chambers, who was an avid fisherman. And he couldn't find the lures he wanted, so out of necessity, he made them himself. Specifically with a trolling motor and a 55-gallon drum of plastisol.
Ingenuity right there, straight out of Georgia. Zoom is currently still based in Watkinsville, but instead of being in Ed Chambers' garage, they now have a 40,000 square foot facility with over 100 employees just sitting there making plastics all day long. Ed Chambers himself is accredited with making now staple colors such as pumpkin and especially its more famous cousin, green pumpkin, which, although Zoom has like 500 colors now, it still makes up 50% of their sold product.
Now, how did Ed Chambers make
Ed Chambers, well, see, it was completely by accident. So what they used to do is when they would run one color through, they had no way to clean the molds. So what they would do is they'd start running their next color through, and whenever they would do that, it would make a batch of mixed colored baits. And they would usually just throw that away, or they would melt it back down and make it into black plastics. And so one day they're running watermelon through. They're making, watermelon worms or whatnot. And he said, all right, it's time to switch to pumpkin. So they run a thing of pumpkin through. This is, the more orangey brown, tannish kind of color of pumpkin for younger guys who don't ever see pumpkin on the store shelf anymore. And whenever they ran that through, they got the mixed color. And Ed Chambers saw this. He's like, don't throw that away. I want to take that fishing. So he goes out, He catches himself some big bass. He rips some lips. He gets him a big bag. And he's like, you know what? I think I'm going to sell this color. And green pumpkin was born, the most popular color in bass fishing. And it's just a staple. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
Everybody has ripped it off. They've all make their own blends. But one thing they all do is they all call it green pumpkin because they know people are going to ask for it by name.
And you know, most of these companies that produce soft plastics, they all have a green pumpkin. And as Logan said, that it's all called green pumpkin. But they can have however many colors they want to aside from green pumpkin. But green pumpkin will stay about 50% of their product sales in soft plastics. It is that popular.
Green pumpkin's just green pumpkin, man. It is what it is.
It works.
Mm-hmm. Where are they at currently, Trey?
Zoom's currently got 75 different patterns of soft plastic with over 500 colors. And that includes distributor-specific colors. Now, Ed Chambers is accredited with a plethora of patterns and designs to include the Brush Hog and the Lizard, which only really Zoom still makes lizards.
Yeah, they definitely
in this
make,
shape.
Yeah, it's definitely the industry standard. Most people who still make lizards are making it at least resembling that old classic Zoom lizard. You'll see them add some appendages or whatnot. But
Like
other
6
than that,
legs instead of 4.
Yeah.
A different tail instead of a curly tail.
And, you know, same with the Brush Hog. Zoom has the Brush Hog. Everybody makes one. They try and make it slightly different, but it's usually that same profile.
The original creature bait.
Which you have one laying right there in front of you, don't you?
Yes, this is another company's version of a Brush Hog, which still resembles the original Brush Hog, which I have tied up over here in the mini version.
The baby Brush Hog there.
Aside from the size difference, you can see proportions are a little different, but at the end of the day, still the same style bait.
Yeah, and if this was the regular size, there would be almost no difference. Other than this one has added rings and these little ridges on the tendrils.
Zoom really was a proprietor of the creature bait. And what else did they make?
Ed Chambers himself came up with the Fluke, the Finesse Worm, the Trick Worm, the Speed Worm, and even the Horny Toad. So basically all of Zoom's, you know, well-known staple baits, they're all due to Ed Chambers.
And they all cover different parts of the water column. Brush Hogs for the bottom, Lizards you can work plethora rays, Flukes can run through the middle of the water column, Horny Toads you can run on top. Early in the late 70s, 80s, they had a lot of product for a lot of different fishing techniques.
And Ed Chambers stayed with Zoom all the way up until he turned 78 and died in 2018.
God rest his soul.
Great man. We owe a lot to him. But that brings us to our bait lineup. Zoom currently offers 33 different types of worms, such as the old monster,
which we have rigged up on a worm hook right here.
Also the Finesse Worm, as everybody knows,
rigged on a shaky head right here.
They also have 4 lizard style baits, mainly just different sizes,
which we showed off earlier, but it looks like a lizard.
They have 5 different Brush Hogs, again mostly just size differences. It is what it is. They have 2 beaver style baits, 5 different frog style baits like the Horny Toad, 5 different Flukes, starting with the super Fluke there, but also the original Fluke.
And then they produce a smaller version of the Super Fluke, the Super Fluke Junior.
Yeah, and there's a couple more sizes, like the Magnum Super Fluke. There's also 7 chunk style baits, as you see here on this jig. That's a jig trailer. They have 7 crawl style baits, which I don't have any laying up here. It is what it is. They have 3 different miscellaneous type trailers, like this spinner bait type trailer here. This is the split tail trailer, great for spinner baits, even buzz baits, really swim jigs, anything really that moves.
Something to beef up the profile of the lure.
Without being just giant. They have 2 grubs, as you see, this Fat Albert twin tail here. They have 2 different tube style baits.
And the only difference is size. They have a smaller and a larger.
And then they have 5 different swim bait types, like the swimming super fluke. And then they have a paddle tail.
Yes.
I think it's called the Z paddle or something. It escapes me at this moment. But that's their bait lineup. They have those several different categories, and it all adds up to about 75 different baits. And again, offered in almost 500 colors. They're putting it out there. If there's a color you're looking for, chances are Zoom has it.
And keep in mind, you know, Zoom created a lot of these colors. And by created, I mean they invented these colors.
Like we went over green pumpkin and pumpkin. I mean, 2 staple colors in bass fishing. I mean,
because keep in mind back then, you had, in terms of plastics, it was like almost pretty much like the Model T.
Yeah.
If you wanted a color, you could get any color you want as long as it was black. And then Mans came out
with the jelly worms, and that introduced, you know, some different colors. You had your reds and your purples come along, but it was still very limited. It was basically black, red, or red and black mixed to make purple. Then Bill Dance came along in like 1972 and said, the only color worm you want to be fishing with is blue. Well, you know, Zoom doesn't think that way. They made 500 different colors.
Indeed.
And they're all still, most of them are all still around today. They only have like 21 discontinued colors. So they just keep adding.
Yeah.
For your pleasure. Now we're going to go over some different applications on how to rig this up. So as you saw, we have the old monster here, just on a 5/0 worm hook.
Text posed.
Just T-rigged.
Yep.
Texas rig. Great style. Then we also have like the Carolina rig if you want to do a lizard. Lizard is a great bait for a Carolina rig, as well as a brush hog. Brush hog's really good for it too. But we didn't want to take the time to rig that up for video.
Be like that.
Now we have Tokyo rig. I have a Tokyo rig rigged up, but I think I left it in the car. So that's my fault.
But it's a Tokyo rig, for those who don't know. It's a cross between a drop shot and a T-rig. Basically, assume that the weight is down here and it's attached to the top of the hook.
You have a 3-way swivel, one for your line tie, one that connects to your hook, and one that has a piece of wire coming straight down. And on that wire, you have your weights and or a bead to make a rattling noise as it bounces along the bottom. And we'll have a video on this in the future, so we're not going to waste much time on that. But expect a video on the Tokyo rig soon if you don't know what we're talking about. Also, we have a shaky head. I'm going to hold up that Finesse Worm there. It's a Finesse Worm on a shaky head. Just throw it out, kind of bounce it around on the bottom, shake it a little bit. Great summertime technique. Weighted swim bait hook. So if you take your fluke, you can just throw it on a worm hook, EWG, whatever you want to do. Or, and that'll stay close to the surface. Or you can throw it on a weighted swim bait hook to get you down to the middle of the water column. Or if you want to let it sink all the way to the bottom, you can do that too, kind of bottom bounce it, depending on what weight you use. There's also the donkey rig. I didn't want to rig that up for a video because you have to have it rigged up on your rod. And it's basically a rig that has 2 flukes, one up on your line a little bit, and then next you have a little bit of like leader line or just a tag in that runs down and has another fluke on it. Now you have 2 flukes in the water. Jig head. It's another great, especially for like a Fat Albert or old style grub. It's an older technique. Pan fishermen still use it all the time, but just throwing a grub on a jig head, I tell you what, that slays bass. It really does. People don't use it as often as they should anymore. It's an older technique. It's been around since the dawn of bass fishing. It still catches them. A lot of their stuff you can throw on as a jig trailer, like we showed you with that chunk earlier. They have craws. The Z craw is a really nice one. The speed craw, all really great jig trailers. That chunk, that's a dead action kind of just sits there and does nothing. But it bulks it up. It adds a lot of bulk. And for summertime bass that just wants a big meal, throw that out there. Or late fall, when it's starting that winter transition, you know, that's great because it's not a lot of action. They're looking for something more dead. Perfect. And then, you know, just flipping and pitching with any of this stuff. Just take an EWG hook or a flipping hook, get your weight, and just flip the banks and see what you get, because I'm sure you'll rip some lips. And that brings us to our review.
Man, it's hard to not, in terms of bass fishing, it's hard not to bring up Zoom.
It really is.
You know, they've been around since '77. They've been doing it hard in the paint ever since then. I gotta give them a 5 out of 5.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I tell you
We're
what,
talking about the company that made green pumpkin here.
You talk about any individual style of bait, whether it's creature baits, swim baits, worms, craws, anything. Zoom has a staple lure in that category, if not multiple. You got the Fluke. I mean, everybody uses a Fluke, and they catch fish. Lizards, great springtime lure. Everybody uses them for bed fishing. Chunks, I mean,
good addition to your jig arsenal.
Grubs, you know, they just proven fish catchers. Tubes, worms, the old monster is a great worm, especially the Magnum old monster. Love that, big Magnum worms. Brush Hog. Brush Hog has to be, if the Fluke is the most well-known Zoom lure, the Brush Hog is a close second, because it's just been around forever and it catches them. It really does. They're one of the original soft plastics companies, you know, and they're still a soft plastics company. You're not going to Zoom if you want crankbaits. You're going there if you want soft plastics. It's a great company. Sure, there's some companies today that rival some of their plastics, you know, but everybody rips them off.
Indeed.
It's just what it is. Everybody has different blends of plastics, and they just rip off their baits.
Especially
the Brush Hog.
You know,
especially.
Aside from the Fluke, the Brush Hog is the most copied lure ever. Think of a company that doesn't have a Brush Hog, and you're going to be thinking for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or finesse worms or trick worms. Everybody has one. It's just a basic bait everybody has in every size. Any finesse or trick style worm that you have, you owe it to Zoom, because they came up with it. Really, Ed Chambers. You owe it to Ed Chambers.
Not only have Zoom lures been used for years by just weekend warrior fishermen, but they have been used at the upper echelon of competitive bass fishermen to absolutely slay tournaments. You know, Wes Logan, to win the 2021 Whataburger Bassmaster Elite at Neely Henry Lake, he used the salty chunks and the speed crawls as his primary soft plastic. Mm-hmm. And he netted almost a 60-pound bag after 4 days.
Yeah.
So these are older designs, yeah, but they still absolutely get the job done.
Especially, and I know I keep going over this chunk, and it's not that much, like, it's not anything special, but it's a fish catcher. Like we just said, Wes Logan, he used almost a very similar setup here to this, but his was the blue sapphire colored chunk instead of a black and blue. And he got like 57 pounds, 9 ounces over 4 days. Crazy. I mean, it's not out of the realm. I mean, it's, you know, it's pro bass fishing, but I mean, I would like to go out and over the course of 4 days catch almost 58 pounds of bass. That's nice.
Yeah.
On one lake. Yeah.
But it's just living proof that this old company can stand with the best of the young bloods out there.
It really can. I mean, they do. I mean, go to any store, anywhere that sells bass lures, and tell me they don't have Zoom plastics. You go to Academy, like half of one of the rows is all Zoom. You go to Walmart, they got a whole own section of just Zoom worms. You go to Bass Pro, Cabela's, you go to local tackle shops, your mom and pop shops, they got Zoom, I promise. They've been around, they're catching fish, and they're gonna keep catching fish way longer than any Guggen bait, I guarantee.
They'll last longer too.
Zoom.